Anna, let me bring you in from Westminster here. What do you make of Labour's stance on all this? I mean, essentially the government's case is that this is going to enshrine existing worker protections.
Well, it's for the Labour Party to decide how it responds to the bill. From a trade union perspective, our main concern is to ensure that working people's rights are protected, not just simply on day one when we leave the EU, but also into the future. The Prime Minister and the government has made repeated commitments that they will protect workers' rights. But there's absolutely nothing in this bill that will ensure that those rights are safe, not just simply on day one, but in years and months to come. And these are core rights that working people rely on every day, whether it's holiday pay, whether it's protection from discrimination, whether it's assistance for working parents, and indeed whether it's protection for some of the most vulnerable in our society, zero-hours contract workers, agency workers. We want better protections for these core rights in the workplace.
Well, David Davis has been at pains today to say that ministers are not going to use these Henry VIII powers to affect things like human rights law or labour legislation. You're not satisfied with that? You aren't happy with just taking him on trust?
Well, we hope we can take him on trust, but we'd like him to act on those promises and to amend the bill to make clear that none of the wide-ranging powers within this legislation can be used to sneak through changes to employment rights, to key rights that workers rely on. We know there are plenty of lawyers out there, plenty of employers and politicians who are calling for a bonfire of rights. We say the government needs to act now to stick by its word and to deliver its promise for working people.
Well, let's talk to someone who represents a lot of employers in the city here. Miles, what do you make of what you've heard today?
So, from our perspective, this is the start of a process. The withdrawal bill is the beginning. As Paul's rightly said, there is a long way to go in terms of what the final future relationship with the EU looks like. The final regulatory relationship that we have with the European Union for our industry is going to be absolutely vital. And it's also vital from the European perspective that they can continue to have access to what's the world's leading financial and related professional services ecosystem. In terms of what we're looking for, we've called for a long time for this to be a fairly clear process where there's no policy change. This is about the smoothest possible, most orderly move as we move out of the European Union. The time for policy changes is a separate time. Future governments, this government, future administrations can look at that in terms of what they require and what they've been elected and what mandate they have. This is much more about maintaining that stability and that ongoing certainty that businesses need in order to serve customers and clients.
The government's in a very difficult position because its plan is quite a rational one. It wants to transplant EU law into UK law so that on Brexit Day +1 we have a mirror image, and that's a basis for legal certainty for people and for companies. And to do that, it does need the power to amend that legislation to make sure that it works. And it needs the power to amend it to make sure that it complies with whatever's being negotiated. And I think actually the government's been quite clear that the amendments are only rectifications. They're not seeking to change employment rights, which are guaranteed by EU law, until a later stage. This is all about freeze-framing EU law as a basis of cooperation for with the EU.